Hey, everybody. Welcome to the What is Money show. I am thrilled to be sitting down today with the legendary fighter, Mr. Kenny Florian. Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, man.
It's great to have you here. I'm glad we're finally getting to do this. I know we've been talking about it for a while. And, as I was saying offline, don't have a big agenda today, but I wanted to just dive into kind of the martial aspects of life a little bit, maybe some of the philosophy and wisdom behind it.
Yeah.
And, it might be useful in this case for my audience that doesn't, know your background. Maybe you just start to give us a little high level overview of who you are and what you've been doing.
Sure. So I come from a pretty large family. Both my parents were from Peru. I grew up just outside of the Boston area, one of six kids. So I had four brothers, one sister. So pretty, male dominated family for the most part. My dad was a surgeon, a physician. So he wasn't around so much. So my mom pretty much took care of all of us. So it was basically me and my brothers causing a lot of havoc around the house. And, my dad also did martial arts throughout medical school and stuff, and thought it was important for all of us to learn martial arts. And we definitely did that, since we were kids. And then I ended up getting back into it in college. I was playing soccer at Boston College, and I had heard about this event called the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And growing up, a big fan of martial arts movies, and essentially, when I heard about the Ultimate Fighting Championship, it was kind of a dream scenario for me in a lot of ways, because it was truly going to define what was the most effective martial arts style. And that was kind of a debate that I grew up with amongst, my brothers, like, which is the best style? Is it a boxer? Is it a wrestler, a karate guy? We did karate. So of course it was the karate guys that were the most dangerous, but, it was all theory up until that point. That was kind of where we were going to find out who was going to be the best martial artist. And, this young, skinny Brazilian guy, Gracie, would go on to dominate in several events. And I started training jiu-jitsu while I was at Boston College. And, it just kind of took a hold of me. I played soccer my whole life. And but at any time I did martial arts as a kid, I felt it was almost like a spiritual experience. And it would ultimately lead me to competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments all over the world. And then I would, fight mixed martial arts. I ended up fighting in the UFC for several years. I fought for 3 world titles in 2 different weight classes in the UFC. Then did commentary. I did color commentary for the UFC as well. So I'm a commentator. I currently do commentary for an organization on ESPN called the PFL, Professional Fighters League. I do commentary for a show on Discovery Channel called BattleBots, where engineers build robots and they kind of fight each other. And I have a podcast. So my whole life kind of revolves around fighting in some way, shape, or form. And I'm a Bitcoiner. So there you go. Hopefully I summed it all up. Kind of a long way to tell a short story.
Well, that is, I think, the biggest fight in the world today is to just
yes,
beat the bullshit out of our money, right?
100%.
So what year then did you start with UFC? Because I remember as a kid watching it, and it's exactly what you described. They were matching different styles, right? It'd be like a boxer versus karate. And then after, it was almost WWF-like. They used to have the smoke and the kind of dungeon-y look to it.
100%.
A lot of theatrics. And then over the years, it just became mixed martial arts. I guess everything blended together.
Exactly. So in the early days, 1993 was their first event. And that was kind of more about, it really was a marketing ploy for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu more than anything else. It was, hey, we have this grappling style where we have real fight experience. We've been in several fights or hundreds of fights over the years. We've defined a style that is very effective against all forms of combat. Whereas other martial arts, it was all theory. It was, this is what we would do in these scenarios, but they didn't really have this systematized plan, I guess you could say. And they didn't have the experience of really like, okay, what would you do if someone really grabbed you? What would you do if someone was trying to punch you or take you down? Whereas jiu-jitsu kind of had all of those answers early on. And it seemed what happened was the answer ended up becoming, you need everything. You need to know how to grapple. You need to know how to strike. You need to know how to game plan. You need to be in great shape. You need to eat well. You need to sleep well. You need to have a strength and conditioning routine. So it ended up becoming more of a sport as opposed to a style versus style type event. So, over the years, they ended up, in the early days, there weren't really any rules. There were basically two rules. You couldn't hit someone in the groin. Actually, no, I think you actually could hit them in the groin. You couldn't eye gouge and you couldn't pull hair or something like that. There were very, very few rules. Whereas over the years, it became regulated and became more of a sport. So it was fascinating to me because, that was the first time that I had seen the martial arts really do what it said it could do. And that was have this little man defeat the big man. And it was so different from how I had imagined it to be. When my brother called me and told me that this Brazilian guy had won the UFC, I said, well, what did he do? Was he jacked? Did he just knock everybody out? And he said, no, he kind of just gets a hold of them. He grabs them and, grinds them down and then just puts them in these holds and guys tap out. And I said, well, it was so uneventful. Like it was such a letdown. I was like, geez. And I went and saw it and I really wasn't a fan of it at first, but then I realized, how powerful it was and how effective it was, by proving itself, and it wasn't about theory. It was about going out there and doing it, and having a better game plan. And it was about intelligence and strategy and ultimately really technique.
Yeah, that's super cool. And interesting that, this is probably one of the most ancient sports actually, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I think
pancration, if you go back.
Yeah, pancration. Right.
Yeah.
But it was kind of absent from, it just didn't exist before the UFC, right? We just had these different, we had boxing and jiu-jitsu, these segregated fighting sports.
It was outlawed at one point. It was considered human cockfighting and all that stuff. So you can imagine when I told my parents that after I graduated from school that I instead of going to law school, that I wanted to become a professional martial artist or whatever the heck that meant. They weren't thrilled with that life choice. Fighting in a cage and stuff like that was, I guess, far away from what they had imagined for me. But it was something that was and it still is, it's this lifelong pursuit of evolution and struggle and getting humbled and just constantly evolving and improving and learning from mistakes. And in a way, it's, very similar to anti-fragility. It's information so you can strengthen yourself.
Yeah. It's much like entrepreneurship or anything where you're sticking your neck out there, right? Taking risks,
right?
Failing,
absolutely,
learning from the failure, applying those lessons, trying again, just iterating. And what came to mind when you were describing that sort of, I guess, childhood curiosity about what style's the best. We used to always pontificate too on like what animal, right? What a great white or a grizzly bear or a lion, right. Whatever.
I still do, by the way. Yeah.
But there's some wisdom here that I didn't know at the time, but when I read Sun Tzu later on, I'll read one of these little quotes here of his where he talks about terrain. Like terrain is the first consideration in any engagement. You have to know what ground you're fighting on. And it doesn't have to be physical ground. It could be, metaphorical.
Sure.
What situation, what's the context, etc. But he has this quote that says, know the enemy, know yourself, know victory will never be know your enemy, know yourself. Your victory will never be endangered. know the ground, know the weather, your victory will then be total. So this whole idea of, winning through awareness almost of a situation, you can't, as you described earlier, you need a strength and conditioning routine. You need to eat right. You need to sleep well. You need to study. You need to train. Like there's all this preparation that goes into the event itself ultimately. And it's kind of like the proverbial, mass of the iceberg below the surface, all these things you don't see that I'm sure you've done a lot of in your career, and you just see the tip of the iceberg in the fight itself.
No question about it. And I think that's what kind of gave jiu-jitsu such an advantage early on in that stage of style versus style. And while it still continues to influence mixed martial arts so much, was they understood the terrain much better. They understood how a fight develops and how you can drag someone into foreign territory to make them uncomfortable and to bring someone into your world. And, whether it's, large scale military attacks or strategy to one-on-one combat, I think one of the best ways to defeat someone is, two ways. You either you get them pinned in some way, shape, or form, or you encircle them. And that's a lot of what jiu-jitsu did. They found the way to either pin you, right? Get your back up against the cage or up against the mat, where now your leverage to throw a devastating strike is now gone. The closer I am to you, the more difficult it is for you to create that leverage and have an impact on your strikes. And jiu-jitsu fully understood that. Even if you go back, to like World War II, the Germans were just, wreaking havoc throughout the Russian countryside until they hit Stalingrad. And they were so close to taking that city. But what the Russians started doing is they got so close to them that it took away a couple things. It took away the Germans' ability to be faster than them. So now they couldn't, that speed element was taken away from them. So their firepower was essentially taken away from them. And also their ability to bomb them was taken away because they were so close to the Germans that if the Germans bombed them, they'd be bombing their own troops. So they got so close to them. And they literally, their strategy was kind of like, get up and hug them. That was almost how close they wanted you to be, where you could throw a grenade at them, you could shoot them. And they took away that firepower advantage of the Germans. And ultimately it's where they were able to hold them off enough until the rest of the Russian troops went around and encircled the Germans and basically trapped them.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of different lessons in that. And, of course, that's not the only way to win, but understanding the terrain and using those elements to slow down your opponent, it's significant. And the efficiency of jiu-jitsu really is what is such a marvel to me, which was so impressive. It's, when you see a smaller man defeat a larger man and almost make it look easy, you say, well, there has to be something to this. There's an efficiency going on. Well, what is that efficiency? There's a whole lot of physics and leverage involved in how you can incorporate the human body to really dominate another human being just by utilizing certain angles and utilizing leverage and knowing where the weaknesses are of the body, where the strengths are, and how you can control them and ultimately submit them.
So interesting. I'd never put that connection together where, the German war machine, I think they called it the Blitzkrieg, right? Lightning warfare, move fast, bomb, but when you hit that wall of Stalingrad, it's kind of like, I guess, going from a striking match to a grappling match in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, I couldn't find this other quote by Sun Tzu, but I'll just paraphrase the message here. He says something about never fight an enemy that's been backed into a corner or has no means of escape, because that's when their spirit reaches maximum ferocity and they'll just
absolutely that's precisely what happened there. Yeah.
And it just these are really important lessons. And I love the term leverage too is really important because it has this physical connotation when you're actually fighting people. Like, do you have the leverage or the position to throw a strike?
Yeah.
But this directly maps on to kind of like the world of business and, economic strategy. And you can use leverage to maybe increase your returns or double down on an effort. If you've got a profitable enterprise and some assets under it, it's good to put a little leverage on it, but you have to be very careful because the leverage can also work against you, right?
Absolutely.
Almost like we even use this term where we describe like the judo move. If someone's coming at you with a lot of energy, then you can actually use their own energy against them. Yeah,
exactly. 100%. And, there's so many nuances of that game. And, it's been a fascinating journey because, for me, I'm always looking for ways now that I'm 45 years old, I'm always looking for ways to be more efficient and to get a deeper understanding of martial arts, to get a deeper understanding of jiu-jitsu and, what are the real things that at play. And what I'm finding more than anything else is that there's more of a stripping away. There isn't necessarily adding on, but there's more of a stripping away. And I find that I'm moving away from systematized things and moving into much more broad conceptual terms and understanding. And I find that it's allowed me to be way more creative with my art. It's allowed me to be way more effective because what's fascinating and frustrating about martial arts or combat in general is that rarely is it a fair fight and rarely is it what you expect it to be.
Right.
When you're being attacked, a lot of times they have a weapon, they're bullying you for a reason, like they're bigger than you. They have 3 or 4 guys. It's rarely a fair fight. So it's okay. Well, how do I structure my ability to defend myself against the unknown? Right. It's not so hard to prepare for the known, right? It's like you get that from experience and looking around and observing and seeing how things go down. But how do you protect against the unknown? Because there's a lot of crazy scenarios that can happen. So building up your defense, a lot like, right, Bitcoin itself, that's what makes it so genius is most fighters, I think, approach it from the standpoint of, I'm a macho guy, I'm tough, I want to go out there and kill that guy. But rarely is the fighter going out and saying, I'm not going to be killed first. You don't get to hurt me. Number one, you don't get to hurt me.
Yes.
Now I'm going to go out and do my stuff to you whenever that opportunity presents itself. So, and it's important for a few reasons, right? It's like, first of all, we only have one brain. It's easy to lose when you're throwing the dice, when you're just, randomly attacking your opponent. And, number 3, you need to be able to preserve yourself. It takes a toll on you. Maybe you don't get knocked out today, but 4, 5, 6, 7 fights later, you start to see, and we've seen it so many times where if you stick around the fight game long enough, and if you had that style of, sit there and brawl and be the tougher guy, that can only take you so far. It's almost like a video game where that energy bar, you start with that full energy bar, but over time it goes down and down and it never goes back to 100%, unfortunately.
Right. No, it's great analogy. And there, like I said, there's no fair fight. That was one of the opening key statements to the series with Sailor, how he's saying there's no fair fight in the universe, basically, that if it was
ideally,
fair, I mean,
if you want to be good.
Yeah. We try to create it, I guess, in the realm of sport, we try to make the rules fair and all of this, but in reality, like you're watching the Discovery Channel or whatever, like they're picking off the weak and the sick, they're trying to develop that asymmetry. That's nature's constantly,
for sure,
culling out, I guess, culling out the weak and the sick through these asymmetric attacks. So it's brutal, but it's kind of like the algorithm of evolution in a way. Like it has to happen because it's very easy for us to get hung up and be like, oh, that's so unfair that whatever cheetah ate the little baby gazelle. But what you're not seeing is that at the species level, it's like actually improving the fitness of all the gazelles and all the cheetahs.
Yes.
So it's such an interesting dynamic. And something else that resonated with me that you said is it's the preparedness that's key, right? It's not like I'm going to learn this one punch and go out and just deliver it to this guy, and that's how I'm going to win the fight. It's like you need to be ready for all possibilities and all eventualities, because it's going to happen at a time you don't expect and in a way you're not expecting. And so in that situation, you need to have like broad and diverse skills and experience versus, some super specialization. Was it Bruce Lee that said, it's not that I've practiced 10,000 kicks, it's that I practiced one kick 10,000 times or something like that?
Yeah, I don't fear the man with 10,000 techniques. I fear the man who has practiced one technique 10,000 times, or it's something along those lines. And it's interesting because I think that there's a lot of different approaches, and not one approach is correct, but one thing that also is true is that when you go back in history to some of the great, leaders of war and strategizers of combat, whether it's Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan, they came with a unique approach. They came with an unusual strategy. They did something that had never been done before. Mm-hmm. And it's brilliant because if you're experiencing the stress of combat, and it's like, I'm talking life or death scenario, and you are surprised by something and you're seeing it for the first time, rarely do you respond in the proper way. When you make your mistake, those people that came with that unusual strategy are right there waiting for you, waiting to take advantage of you. And, it's like we were saying before, that's an unfair fight. We're not approaching, we're not going to line up all of our troops and then shoot or come at you with a sword in a cadence where you can time us and it's going to be, your traditional warfare. We're going to do, whether it's guerrilla warfare, in Vietnam, or, it's all these unusual and unexpected strategies that oftentimes win the war and throw the enemy for a loop.
Yeah, it's so true. When I boxed a little bit in college, and one of the main things they tried to teach you was to always set the pace of the fight. And it's the last thing you want to do is fall into a pattern of any kind, because once you're in a pattern, the enemy can identify the pattern and then out compete you, basically.
100%.
Right? 100%. So is that something similar? Is that a similar strategy you use in fighting?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why a lot of people get things wrong about fighting. I think, it's not as simplistic as, let's see who's tougher, or this guy landed 10 punches to your 2 punches, therefore he's winning the round. It comes down to your position. How do I position myself to be stronger than you? And this goes for whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's boxing, kickboxing, whether it's, any type of, military conflict. It's how can I position myself to defeat you, to give me an advantage repeatedly over time until you eventually have to succumb or give up, or all of your men are dead. And, it's comes down to, and so if you're talking about, let's say, striking, for example, what does it mean to not have patterns? Well, you can't be predictable. Where do you get your predictability from? It's all comes from your feet, your footwork, the strikes or patterns that you keep throwing with your strikes. The more weapons you have, the more unpredictable you are. The more you feint, the more confusing it is as to whether you're going to attack or not. And the types of feints that you're throwing. You're going low, you're going high, you're throwing body shots. Now you're going upstairs and you're taking my head off, or, looking like you're going to strike with me and then taking me down, or, attacking from above when you have your, all of your men on the ground, so it's coming with, these unusual strategies, which often means having superior position. And in jiu-jitsu, there was a concept that I kind of came up with, everyone talks about base, and everyone talks about base in regards to what your balance is like. But, it doesn't tell the whole picture. You know, everyone says in jiu-jitsu, like, have a good base. Well, your base is only as good. And it all depends on your opponent. So your base connection is what's most important. It's how you're connected to your opponent. So what is your position in relation to your opponent? Because I could be strong in one way, but if my opponent is somewhere else, then I'm no longer strong.
Right.
So I have to constantly be aware of where my opponent is and how I need to adjust my body or adjust my position to be superior to you. And if you're doing jiu-jitsu properly, I let you do all the work. I let you carry my weight as many times as possible. And if you are trying to put your weight on me, then I'm not trying to carry your weight. I'm trying to deflect your weight repeatedly. So it becomes this very elegant dance of feeling the energy and the force vectors of your opponent and trying to outmaneuver them. And it happens like that. And you need to know positioning so well that you can do it repeatedly to them, because once a mistake is made, a lot of times you're not able to make up that ground again if you're going against someone who is truly elite.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, the idea of position being key to really any contest of will. You know, I'm thinking of even in poker, right? It's all about position. It's all about your stack relative to your opponents. Clearly in business, you know, actually Sailor said this to me too. They said that you could compress all of business school into one sentence, which is keep your options open. And that's position, right? Like you're keeping relative to your opponent, how many options do you have at your disposal versus how many options they have?
Exactly.
And when you're, you know, impressing your willpowers against one another, the guy with the most options will ultimately win in the course of time.
100%. It's why no one wants to go to war with the United States if they can avoid it. Like no one's purposely or overtly trying to go to war with the United States. It's not a very good battle. Even, you know, amongst, you know, the other world powers. And, you know, no one wants to go to war because that's never a great scenario when you're talking about country versus country. But if you're going to pick a fight, very few are trying to pick a fight with the United States. There's just so much military power everywhere. It's like, you're not going to win the Air Force war. You're not going to win the naval war. You're not going to win the ground war. Right. All right. What about tech? Well, they're probably not going to win it there either. Yeah. So it's like the more options you have, the more weapons at your disposal, especially if you know your weapons, the better off you're going to be in essentially any conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. It gets back to terrain earlier too. I read, I can't remember what it was. It was a book describing the dominance of the US, but it was largely attributing our geopolitical dominance because of our geography, right? We have this, we're between the East and the West, and we have a ton of coastline with access to European markets, a ton of coastline with access to Asian markets. We've also, used that to establish naval dominance. We've got, Hawaii's a pretty strategic location that we took over 60 some odd years ago.
Yes.
So again, this idea of options, just as access to water really gives you a lot of options in the geopolitical landscape.
No question about it. I think that's what essentially in a lot of ways, I don't think it was this simple, but I think in a lot of ways, that's what threatened Japan so much during World War II was, we started, spreading out our naval bases out towards their territory out in the Pacific. And I think they were threatened by that for sure, as they were, looking to take control of that area. And, their first target that they hoped to weaken was Pearl Harbor, of course. And Pearl Harbor was kind of located in that area where, it was kind of hidden, like they were, wanted to protect against things like, torpedoes and, missile attacks and things like that. Again, it was an unusual strategy from the Japanese that threw them for a loop, but
they used surprise, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's such a good point. I'm curious a little bit about jiu-jitsu. You said it had a lot of things figured out kind of before MMA really emerged. What was with that? Was jiu-jitsu just kind of the old wisdom of like the reality of fighting, and it was just the best baseline for MMA, or like how I guess maybe a little backstory on jiu-jitsu, and then how did it all become MMA?
For sure. Great question. So the Japanese, Brazil has a very large immigration of Japanese. Peru does as well in South America, but a lot had immigrated to Brazil and set up a lot of diasporas throughout the country. And throughout that process, there was a visiting judo master, and they had linked up with a prominent political family at the time, the Gracie family. And he had taught some judo, jiu-jitsu. Judo and jiu-jitsu was kind of synonymous at the time. It was kind of the same thing. And had taught the Gracies and the Gracie family some jiu-jitsu. And the Gracies had kind of taken that knowledge and developed it over time. And one of the ways that they developed it over time was through real fights. Like, these guys were scrappy. They wanted to see what worked and how it would work in a real fight. And they would often test themselves. And it was quite common to have what they called like dojo storms, where you would go into a school and say, hey, I want to test myself. Like, you guys are karate guys, or you guys are a boxer, you're a wrestler. Let's fight. Let's see what's better. Let's see how I can improve my technique. And they did it through experience. They did it through real fights, and they attained so much knowledge and information because of that. Karate and a lot of the other martial arts had been distilled down to more tame versions of themselves, where it was no longer about, hey, we're going to do a real fight, because it was dangerous, right? It was more like, hey, I'm going to break this brick, or I'm going to break this wooden block, or I'm going to show you, these elegant forms of what we do. But there is no practical execution as far as real one-on-one combat of making their art more effective. It had become, I guess neutered. I don't know if neutered might be more of a strong word, but almost a lot of their effective techniques. Yeah, it became more theoretical, and they took away what made those martial arts so great. So they had a huge advantage because of that. And what they found, and it was brilliant, was, if I want to hit you, I need to get close enough in order to do that. I need to take some kind of, or for the most part, make some kind of advancement towards you in order to hit the target. Well, they understood that as well. And they said, well, as you come towards me, I'm going to go towards you as well. If I stay here, I get hit. If I crash into you and grab you before you're able to hit me, then I can control your body, take you to the ground where you'll often be off balance. And then I can pin you. I can use the floor and my body weight to essentially sandwich you, and then wait for a mistake, essentially. And their goal was to essentially find the weak points of the body, which are the levers of the body, like the arms, the legs, the neck. If you look at, the animal kingdom, what does every big cat or bear go for? They attack the neck. This is the weakest part of the body. It's connected to the spine, which is really our, sort of life force, the thing that holds us together. And if you can get a hold of that, you're in big trouble. And not just because you can cut it, right? But also if you're able to cut off, the carotid artery that goes to the brain, if you could close that gap enough, it's like stepping on a hose where you stop that flow of water. You're stopping the flow of blood to your brain, and it has nothing to do with toughness anymore. It's not, I'm going to out tough this choke. No, the blood is not going to your brain anymore. You go to sleep and you're done. So it really was very scientific, and they used a lot of physics as far as, utilizing the levers of the body and understanding, how to control the center of mass, how to get underneath you, how to get you to carry, my weight. And it was just a brilliant model of efficiency. And I feel like it continues to evolve in many ways. And, I think other arts have been strengthened because of it as well, because they realize, okay, well, if I want to be an effective fighter, I need to understand my opponent. I need to understand my enemy. I need to know what they do. And because of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although it's not as dominant as it was, decades ago, it has strengthened fighting as a whole. Everyone is better because of it.
Interesting. So that then the Gracie family, I think you said, was started doing. I mean, so they started UFC before there was UFC, basically, right? They were doing this experimentation.
Robert, it's so funny. What actually, also got me into it was the Gracie family. They were, a lot of them were based out in Southern California, and they kind of brought, some of their tactics that they used in Brazil to Southern California. And they had a open challenge, and anyone from any martial art, no matter how big you were or who you were or whatever it was, if you beat them in a challenge, you would get $100,000. So basically they would put out almost like, these wanted signs out there. And it was like, hey, do you want to win $100,000? If you beat us, we'll give you $100,000 if you can, knock us out or choke us out or whatever. And they would film these battles, and they used it as promotional material, and it was called Gracie in Action. And it was basically these real life fights on the beach, in the dojo, on the streets, and they would show the effectiveness of their art. And I believe it was like kind of a documentary style with narration by one of the Gracies. And the video started out with, big cats attacking other animals in the wild. And that's kind of how they promoted it, but it was wildly successful.
That's interesting. So what was coming to mind is that they were basically, again, back to like entrepreneurship, they were tinkering with fighting styles before UFC was even a thing. And then what you just described sounds almost like a bug bounty program in software. Yeah. They're like, they'll issue here's our software. If you can crack it, we'll give you a reward. 100%. Did anyone ever win that? Or
no, not that I knew of anyway. Yeah. It certainly wasn't promoted as such. But my understanding, it never went down that way. Gracie really wasn't defeated until relatively recently, I guess. I don't want to say super recent, but certainly not, they were undefeated for a very long time. They started doing this in like the 70s. So you can imagine the amount of experience that they had going into the 90s at this point in the United States and globally. And when I saw jiu-jitsu, I was just fascinated by it. And I knew it was special, and I knew it would eventually catch on, just because, a lot like Bitcoin or whatever, it's like you see the technology and how effective it is. And you're like, this is something that a lot of people are going to start to learn and practice and fall in love with. If I'm falling in love with it, and I'm seeing, the beauty and brilliance of it, many other people will as well. And it was super early on. And now jiu-jitsu is like, one of the most popular martial arts ever. The Gracie Academy, I think, was the first academy, jiu-jitsu academy anyway, to start grossing over $1 million a year. And they became this huge, business. They became this huge empire. And, it's been amazing to see. And then, mixed martial arts, back when I started fighting, people were like, wait a sec, what's the UFC and what is that exactly? And, that no one knew what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was, and no one really knew what MMA was or the UFC was. And now it's, this sport, the UFC was purchased for like over $4 billion just a few years ago. So it's grown like crazy. And, I think a lot of people, resonate with, warriors and fighting. And I think it's in all of us, right? We wouldn't be here today without someone in our line defending us or fighting for what they believed in, or to protect their home or village.
Yeah, no, excellent point. And it's, hey, everybody. As you've no doubt learned by watching this show, Bitcoin is the single most important asset you can own in the 21st century. And one of the most important companies in Bitcoin today is NYDIG. NYDIG's mission is to get Bitcoin into the hands of as many people as possible. One of the ways they are accomplishing this mission is by empowering banks and financial technology companies to offer their own Bitcoin products and services. As a true game changer in the industry, NYDIG is safely unlocking the power of Bitcoin for forward-thinking individuals and institutions alike. Led by Robbie Gutman, Yin Zhao, and Ross Stevens, NYDIG has absolutely exploded onto the Bitcoin scene recently and has quickly become a leader in this space. So, whether you are a professional investor looking for asset management services or a company looking to white label your own Bitcoin product or service, consider NYDIG your single source solution for everything Bitcoin. Yeah, so it's interesting that we forget that everyone alive basically is descended from someone that survived the struggle, right, of existence. And that struggle historically has been very violent. Like this, all of human history. I watched this documentary recently, Baraka. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
It's pretty cool. It's on Netflix or Amazon or something, but there's no words in the whole documentary. It's just filming different scenes from cultures around the world and mixing it in with like kind of some natural footage. And it's just interesting. You know, we've been fighting amongst ourselves forever, basically. And somehow in that process becoming more civilized, which is kind of interesting too. It's like we take it for granted that we trust strangers. You know, we just go into the mall or whatever, or sit in a theater, and, you know, we just assume everyone's peaceful, but it's been a long, bloody road to get to this point. So I was just thinking that, you know, this kind of maybe ties into Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin could really change how we relate to each other again. So maybe, you know, who knows what's going to happen, but if this large nation state model starts to unravel, which it looks like it might be right now, the way things are looking in the world, there might be more demand for people to learn MMA and Jiu-Jitsu and these things just to like be alive in the world, right? Just to be able to take care of yourself. What do you think about that? Like, do you think everyone should learn some type of self-defense, or like, what's your position on that?
Oh man. I mean, yeah, I think there's so much there. I think, and I couldn't agree more. Is it going to solve everything in regards to, you know, Bitcoin? No. I mean, we are at war with ourselves, like you said, and a lot of times we need something. But I think that what it will cut down on is a lot of what we've seen, especially, you know, large scale global warfare. You know, when our resources are now protected, then and it's no longer in our best interest to attack those resources, then shit, I got to go find something else to do. It's like, I'm not going to rob that house. Like that house got like eight Rottweilers. They got guns over there. They got I'm good. I'm not going to attack that house. I'm good. I'm going to try to look for an easier target. And if everyone's resources are now protected like that, it's like, well, they now have the ultimate defense system. And that's the way I see Bitcoin. And in regards to, should everyone do some kind of martial art? Absolutely. I think we need that more than ever. I think there's for me specifically, and it's different for everyone. And I think you can get this in a variety of ways. It's sports or, you know, strength and conditioning, but it's got to be something physical. You know, we have this vessel that is capable of so many amazing things. And one thing is sure is that we don't get stronger and we don't get smarter and we don't become more efficient without struggle. We need a constant type of adversity and in order to strengthen ourselves. And, you know, I had these t-shirts that were always made before every fight, and it always encompassed mind, body, and spirit. And I certainly didn't make it up. But those are often three words that are associated with the martial arts and the martial spirit. But it's the only thing that I feel that has unified those three things: mind, body, and spirit. And, I played soccer at a high level. I did a lot of different sports and, certainly enjoyed myself in a lot of different ways, doing sports and other things. I've traveled, and you can get a lot of great highs in a lot of different ways. But the martial arts has provided so much to me. Like everything I know is almost because of it. And it's this abyss as well. It's never ending. The deeper you go, the deeper it gets. I've learned so much about myself in that way. And, it's humbling because it's hard and it hurts oftentimes, physically, spiritually, and mentally. But the lessons are things that you take with you, and you can't run away from yourself. And you learn to be a very good strategist. You learn to identify your weaknesses and your mistakes and be humble and know that, hey, if you have a bad day here or a bad day there, that, could be the end of you. And you have to continue to work hard, because there's a lot of people that are doing the same as you, especially if you're in, the competitive field of things, or even within your own dojo and your academy. There's always some guy who's got a certain move or a certain position that's really difficult to deal with. And no one is really going to help you except you. Like, I could be this phenomenal teacher, and I do my best to be the best teacher that I can possibly be. But the best teacher is yourself. It's like, how do I give you the skills and understanding to teach yourself? Because at the end of the day, doesn't matter what I say or what I tell you to do physically, you have to do the work. And there's no escape from that. And that's the thing. It's like, the truth always reveals itself in combat. There is no escape. Sometimes you get lucky, but rarely is that the case. That someone will expose you somewhere. So it's on you to make sure that never happens.
Wow. Yeah. It's very powerful. And, it seems to me that if we universalized this training, and not to make it mandatory or anything, but just to have a culture of people trained in combat, even trained with firearms, things like this.
Yes.
That it actually, people think it sounds barbaric or anarchic or something, but it actually preserves peace. Like a lot of the guys I've hung out with, the guys that are trained fighters, they're the coolest, most level-headed dudes you'll ever meet, because it's like, what are we going to do? Fight? Like they know how to handle themselves in a situation, versus the other version of like the bro that wants to go into the bar and fight. Like he's not a trained fighter. He doesn't have those principles.
I agree.
In him.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it does. It brings an internal peace. And also you have an understanding of war, of what war is. It's like the people that are, trying to call for war, and these hawkish people that are looking to go to battle and overtake, this country or that country, whatever. Oftentimes it's not the guys that have seen war. Many times it's the people that are the furthest away from the battlefield, that have no idea what it means to take a life or to work your ass off to be good at a martial skill.
Right.
Because they don't know what that is. The most dangerous person in the world is, a weak coward who knows nothing of those things. Who isn't sweating, who doesn't know what it's like to suffer and to hurt and know what it's like on the battlefield. And I certainly don't. Like I've never been in a real war, right? I only know what it's like on a one-on-one combat, but like, that's why I got so much inspiration from, the military and military history, and the elite of our military, whether it's the special operations groups or, the famous battles that have taken place in history. It's like the things that those guys have seen, the things that they have experienced, the men that were lost, the lessons that were there. It's like, it's this ugliness and beautiness all together, which is what life is all about, for better or worse. It just is. And, how we take those lessons and learn from it. It's really important how we move in the future. And, knowing that, I think it doesn't lead you into war. It makes you more prepared for it, but also gets you to understand it's not something you want to do.
Right. Exactly. That's the thing. You get it's almost a paradox in a way. It's like the more prepared you get for battle, the less you seek battle, right? Because you know there's cost and risk. Like you've experienced it directly. So I mean, I've never been in war either, but just reflecting on like the feeling of being in the ring and being, it's kind of like Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face. Like it's a whole different mode of being, you know, and you can only imagine that scaled up to a nation of many millions. It's hell, right? So you almost want to do anything you can to work away from it. But to your point, you have these weak guys like, you know, bomb them or, you know, other thing. They want to violate property in many ways. I saw it was one of the health ministers saying like, oh, we got to go, you know, put a jab at everyone's arm. I'm like, dude, chill your shit out. Like just let people choose what they want to do.
Right. Imagine that. Yeah. You know, Robert, it's almost, I'm not exaggerating, but I think the moment that I realized that, you know, Bitcoin was the art of fighting without fighting, it almost brings a tear to my eye when I realized it, because it's like, that is the ultimate level. That is the ultimate level. When you've reached such a level where you go, I can't do anything to that person. I can, you know, I punch them and they're like water, or I try to grapple them and they're like water. Yes. The harder I attack, the more it hurts me. This doesn't make sense for me to do this. It is like, it's everything encompassed into this beautiful form of defense. It's the ultimate citadel. And it's the fact that was able to be created is, when you really, really think about it, it's one of the greatest marvels we have ever seen, have ever had. And
it's mind-boggling.
It inspires me in what I do, because it's like, okay, I can go out there, right? So if you look at the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, there was Ares and there was Athena. Ares was the god of war. Athena was the goddess of war. The ancient Greeks didn't really praise Ares as much. They really worshiped Athena, because Ares was this bloodthirsty, you know, guy who, if he had to win, it was about hacking the enemy and just getting it done and just being this demon on the battlefield. Whereas Athena had the approach of intelligence, strategy, gracefulness, elegance. That's the art. That is the art of fighting. It's like, how do I get you to trip on your own, like without even touching you? Like, so, you know, and you can take it to extremes, but that is when I see a true master of the martial arts, is when it's absolutely effortless. They are moving with minimal energy. They're making the other person struggle so much. And that's what I try to explain people. You know, what the goal of jiu-jitsu is, if you think about it, on your first day, you're nervous, you're tense, you're sweating, you're freaking the hell out. The master is as far away from jiu-jitsu guy on day one as possible. Like, you have to be so far, you have to be composed, efficient, almost using no energy, smooth, you know, all those things. That's when you're really doing jiu-jitsu. That's when you are an artist. And it's easy to be a fighter. It's hard to be an artist.
Beautifully said. And I mean, this is Sun Tzu's like capstone teaching. He says the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
Exactly.
Right. And it's with Bitcoin, it is gorgeous because he also teaches formlessness, right? To be kind of like Bruce Lee says, be like water, you know, flow, but also be able to crash. And with Bitcoin, I mean, I keep seeing new dimensions of it. You know, recently when China exiled Bitcoin mining, it's like all the miners get unplugged in China, they get shipped elsewhere, and they get plugged back in. And you watch the hash rate. It's like China punches Bitcoin mining. And it just is this cloud that like absorbs the punch and then just
where is
itself.
Bitcoin? Where is it? Can you find it? Do you have it in your hand? Can you touch it? Can you grab it? Can you?
Exactly. And then the wealth storage aspect. It's like, you want to come and get me and try to get my Bitcoin. Well, it's in a multi-sig custody solution that's geographically distributed. You can't do it. I couldn't give it to you if I wanted to.
Right.
And then, so it's all, and the fascinating thing to me is that kind of like Athena, was it Ares was the demon on the battlefield. That's not economical. That's not the economic way to deal with battle. It's better to outwit your opponent, or to be formless, or to be to not be a pattern, right? To not be predictable. Yes. And it's just incredible how much Bitcoin embodies those principles.
Truly.
Yeah. How did you get into Bitcoin? What's the story there? Because you just came out, for me, you just came out of the blue on Twitter, and I was like, oh shit, I love this guy. I've been watching him since I was probably a kid
man.
Since I've been watching you.
Yeah, man. So I think it was in like 2015 or 16 was the first time, I had heard of Bitcoin, but, didn't really know much about it. It just wasn't on my radar really. And that's it. But my buddy in Los Angeles had told me, he's like, hey man, like this thing called Bitcoin is down to $75 right now. You got to get it. And I was like, well, tell me about it. Like, what's the deal? And in my mind, the first thing, and I think it's almost in a good way, but it was terrible because I missed out on the opportunity of a lifetime back then, but everyone has that story. Right. But I remember just thinking like this, there's no way the United States or any country is going to allow it. How would this succeed? I immediately came with it. Like I was combative towards it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was amazing, but at the same time, like, can this really be like, no, like there's no way. So I dragged my feet on it for a while. And it wasn't until 2016, 17, where I started getting into the space. And I was going to get Bitcoin, and someone was like, do get into this, I shall not mention the name, and like get into this. And then, this is cheaper. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's cheaper. Okay. So then, I ended up making a bunch of money. And then as I was doing a little bit more research, I'm like, no, wait a sec. Bitcoin's a thing. Like it's expensive for a reason. Like this is, so I sold all of that and went into Bitcoin, and I've been in Bitcoin since 2017. And I've been accumulating until this week.
Beautiful.
So I've, and of course I made the mistake of selling some very little, thankfully, and trying to get into other things, because of course, if you get into something that's 0.0001 cents, then you can make so much more money. But, so you make your stupid thing, but I think it was an essential part of my process. I learned best from making stupid mistakes, man. Yeah. But thankfully it wasn't a horrible mistake, but it has strengthened my belief in it. I truly believe that, anywhere, 2018, anything before 2018, 2019 is a big time risk. Now, I don't think Bitcoin's risky. I really don't. It's not. Like, to me, I'm such a believer at this point. I'm just hanging out, man. I'm chilling, I'm past the point of checking it every day, maybe to buy, but like, not because I'm like, oh my gosh, how much money do I have? It's more just like, I have a pretty quiet confidence about it. And it's just been amazing that but the resources, like Robert, and I'm not here to like, tell you how great you are, but it's people like you that have been educating myself. And, there's so much great information out there now, and it's on them to go out and find it and listen and study. And sometimes it takes listening to those things twice, 3 times, and investigating more and more. And the amount of information that I've accumulated over the last few years has just been a godsend. It's been amazing. And I've never been more optimistic about Bitcoin and about the future. And it's an amazing space with a lot of really intelligent people that I've learned a lot from.
Yeah, man. Well, I really appreciate you saying that. It gave me just this, impetus to write and talk more. And I've been very thankful for it. Now I'm extremely grateful because I've managed to connect this passion for learning that's become teaching, but it's not, I don't even consider it teaching. It's like, I'm just learning out loud basically. And then, engaging with people in the process. And I've connected that with a profession. So I feel very like Bitcoin's been an overwhelming experience for me in a lot of dimensions.
It's similar in that, like in jiu-jitsu, it kind of dragged me in a lot of different, I guess, paths as well, in that, what started out as just jiu-jitsu, started out in, led me to travel, all over the world. It led me to, read a lot about, war and history and, all these different things and philosophy. And, Bitcoin does that like on steroids. It's, it drags you into so many different realms that, you weren't even aware of. And you begin to really learn about so many different aspects. And it's been so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It just, it's weird. It's even the namesake of the show, what is money? It's just like this simple question. It's like, how could we not know what money is? Like, we fucking think about it and use
simple question, complicated answer.
Yeah. And then it's like, you if you really ask, it's like the bottom falls out from under you. And you're like, wait, I have no idea what money is. What else don't I know? And you're like, oh, what is value? What is this?
Absolutely.
Have you experienced significant transformation? Because I know you said you've been in Bitcoin for like 1 4-year cycle.
Yeah.
To the point where you're numb to the price, which I think is a very important path of maturity almost in Bitcoin. Like the people that are still worried about the price day to day, it's like, I'm like, you haven't been here long enough. Just keep studying. Right. Well, how have you changed as you've gotten into Bitcoin?
Gosh, I think that, man, I guess I can go back to when we had that crash that went to the 3000s.
March 2020.
Yeah. And I was in kind of a tough situation financially, in that I didn't have job security. I didn't, I was questioning a lot of things. I was kind of in like, all right, well, what do I want to do here? I hadn't worked in a little while and was thinking about what I wanted to do and thinking about a lot of different things and had a lot of different businesses and stuff. But like, I got away from, doing a lot of the TV stuff and things. And so I wasn't sure about the future, and it had gone down, and, like I had a decent amount of money in it. And my wife was like, okay, so what's going on? What are you doing with this? And I was like, I've been thinking about this and I want to buy more. And she was like, excuse me. I was like, I want to buy more. Like, I feel like I need to buy more. And I know it's risky and all that. And I did it. And, certainly, sure enough, it went back up and all that stuff. And it gave me, confidence in myself, to believe in myself, and to believe in what I see, and to keep on studying, of course, keep on learning about it. But I felt a good amount of validation there. And then from there, it just went deeper and deeper and started dragging me into, philosophy and history and property rights and, I guess some of the technological stuff, which is, for me, who doesn't come from that world, is kind of one of the toughest ways to kind of approach it. In some ways, it's like, get the general idea of what Bitcoin does and why it's cool, but don't like get so much into it because it can confuse you. So, but yeah, I mean, just from, I guess, a historical frame point, and from, asking that question of what is money, and understanding economics better, and the political game, and how we got here, and what's the role of the central banks and the Fed, and what is fiat, and so all these things you start to realize, you're like, wait a sec, this makes way more sense than what we've been told. And why aren't we told this stuff in school? And why aren't we really on a deeper level, talking about financial responsibility in school? Like, we're learning about all this other stuff, but like, we're not learning about really how to save money and how to do this and how to do that. It's just like, get a job and spend, and get a job and spend. And it's you realize the other thing that was major, and I understood this in other ways, but just the things that we think we know, we don't know. And there's very few experts out there, Robert. Like even, when I'm in my field and I see a journalist write about something, or I hear another expert in the field talk about something, like that's not how it is. That's not how jiu-jitsu works, or how fighting works. So that's not the thing, man. Like go deeper. And I think it gets you to realize there's very few experts. What we're told is not the truth. And it's on us to go out there and search for it and make an honest effort at doing so. I think it's going to bring a much more truthful world, a much more beautiful world, and one that kind of puts everyone at ease. And I think a lot of people for many, many years, probably over the last 100 years, have been working their asses off and not understanding where this anxiety is coming from, despite having a secure job and the house with the white picket fence, and still not understanding, like, why the hell do I feel like I'm caught in this rat race? And we've all been there, but I feel like Bitcoin has taken that away from me. And it's like, what's the value of that?
Yeah, man. Excellently said. And I couldn't agree more. I went through the fiat rat maze, and even having some success, quote unquote success, I was not feeling better about life. I was feeling worse. I was like deeper in the darkness, less meaning. I was lost. And yeah, I don't know. I'm exploring that a lot. Like, what is it about fiat world? And I don't, if it's like, we have this embodied lie in the money. It's like the money is not what it represents itself to be. It's supposed to be time or energy. Well, it's not, because it's constantly being debased.
Yeah.
So does that infect us? Like, we're using a bad tool so it makes us bad? I'm not sure, but something about moving away from that and just denominating your life in Bitcoin and following the rabbit holes that it leads you down, philosophically, intellectually, it enriches your life so much.
Absolutely. I think there's so much mystery in the fiat world of how things work. And there's just certain sleaziness, and you just don't feel good about the methods that are used in a lot of ways. And it's like, you start to kind of like think that that's the way, and like, well, it must be normal. So I guess like, I'm supposed to lie and cheat and steal. Like this guy's doing it, and this guy's doing it, and this is all my bosses are doing. Like, might as well. Like, all right, well, I almost feel like the Bitcoin network is like this Bitcoin realm. It's this Bitcoin world that you pass into eventually. And it's like, these guys are doing their stuff. Like the fiat people are doing this fiat stuff, and the Bitcoin people are doing this whole Bitcoin thing. And maybe this isn't fully developed yet, but it's getting there. And it's like, it's a lot brighter, and it's clearer, and it's not fuzzy. And it's this, it's a clearer communication across all aspects. I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's clarifying just in general in so many ways, but we sound crazy, almost outsiders. You have to like live through it.
Yeah.
But it's reassuring to me to see it happening in the lives of others. Like, it's not just me going through this personal transformation because I'm interacting with magic internet money. Like, there's other people experiencing this thing too. So it's a real rabbit hole. And I don't think anyone knows. We're calling it money. We're calling it technology. You could even call it a social institution in some ways, but none of the terms we have quite capture it, which also lends me to believe it's something so big. Like, we don't have the language for it really.
Yeah, absolutely. And geez, I think Saylor, kind of distilled it beautifully. And I know you've had many hours with him that has enlightened me, but like, it's energy. Like, everything is energy. Jiu-jitsu is the mastering of energy, and those who control the energy and those who can retain the energy are going to be better off because of it. And I think that we're seeing that with Bitcoin, and there is this direct correlation to that ability to retain it, that ability to protect it, that ability to preserve it. And we haven't had anything like that Like
Right.
you don't have to give your energy to some other person who's going to, you know, squeeze you of it while they're using it. And you don't have access to it. It's not really yours. And this is the first time that we're able to do that separate from the state. And again, it's absolutely mind blowing. First of all, that we never had this before, but that it's actually been created and executed on quite a beautiful level and on a deep level.
And just in time, it seems like.
Yeah, right.
Like,
well, exactly. It's like this, someone knew what was going on, you know?
Like if Bitcoin were not a thing, really, if it were not at least where it is today, because if it were just launched, it would, you know, we wouldn't know about it. But the fact that it's reaching, I guess you'd call it adolescence right now when the world seems to need it a lot. Like the world needs a light to move towards, because it's a lot of dark shit going on out there.
Totally.
And it's what you said, it's like it's inspired you to do all these things, is to go down these rabbit holes, like to work, frankly. Like that's a big thing I've noticed is in fiat world, like I had to force myself to work. Like I didn't, the sleaziness you described, I felt the sleaziness. You know, there's all these like political games being played. You have to navigate this messy kind of arena. And it's just like, oh, I have to force myself to do it, because what else do you do in the world? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in Bitcoin, it's the exact opposite. It's like you're inspired to work. Like I wake up just alive and electric every day to get into this.
Absolutely. Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? That's the thing. It's like, we are talking about it like it's this unusual thing, but like that's what we're supposed to be doing. And there's no better feeling when you're like, you know what, my money is secure and my money is mine, and I've worked hard for that, and it feels good, and there's accountability and there's understanding, you know, and then I can now focus on the things that I love, the things that I'm passionate about, and try to make that pot a little bit bigger. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And, you know, like to put a button on it with what you said, it's all energy, right? Everything. And this is not, we're not like, you know, spiritual babble here. E equals MC squared. Mass is frozen energy. Everything in the universe is energy. It's energy on a tapestry of space and time. It's ridiculous that humans did not have a place to store their energy that other humans could not fuck with up until this point. Right. So like it's this that old phrase of power to the people. It's like Bitcoin's literally giving power to the people. So you can actually hold your life's work and energy in something that no one else can mess with.
Yep.
So cool.
Couldn't agree more, man.
Dude, this has been awesome. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely, man. No, thanks so much for having me, man. Great to be a part of this podcast. I've been a fan of yours and, you know, your writings early on, and then now your podcast that you started, and wishing you all the best, man. It seems like you're killing it, and continued success, dude.
Thanks, man. It means a lot. Yeah. If you could just let my audience know where they can find out more about you and your work.
For sure. You guys want to check me out at kennyflorian.com. I also just came out with a jiu-jitsu instructional that covers a lot of my conceptual understandings at kennyflorianmartialarts.com. If you're a martial artist or aspiring martial artist or want to try it, to check that out. And I'll be doing some stuff on ESPN and on Discovery Channel for BattleBots and PFL. And thank you guys.
Awesome. Very cool. Maybe when I get over to Tennessee, I'll come see you and we'll do some training.
Yeah, man, for sure. Yeah, I think Nashville's just a few hours away. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Kenny, thank you.
Right on, dude. Thank you.